Good morning over there in Sweden. Good to hear from you. I'm Quentin and just waiting for Mum and Dad in Ashby de la Zouch, but it's Tuesday morning and I'm on my vineyard ramble this morning. Let's just have a quick look where I am. It's actually pretty noisy out here in my vineyard, but if you've got your tea towels at the ready, this morning I am down here, literally where my little car is on the tea towel, my Diane, and I'm in the Rebouls vineyard in the Carignan again. Oh, there's Mum and Dad here. Great, good to see you, Mum and Dad. So we're in the Rebouls. I'm just telling people, Mum and Dad, that we're in the Rebouls vineyard that we actually know as Calvé, because Calvé, Monsieur Calvé, was the man that we bought this vineyard off. But it's my old Carignan vine, 110-year-old Carignans. But this morning we're going to have a quick ramble through the Carignan vines, and then we're going to go and catch up with Jean-Marc, who's down there on his tractor, and we're going to be finding out exactly the history of these sarments. So in French they're sarments, or the branches that we have taken off the vines while we're pruning, and what we do with them now. So this is just a quick look. Morning vine, how are you this morning? You all right? So you can see I had a nice back and side. So Paul has been in pruning yesterday. We are going to have a lesson one day on how to prune. That's going to come in next week. But let me walk down, catch up with Jean-Marc. There's also somebody in the field opposite, replanting, I think. So a big tractor, I think it's the Rebouls over there. But I just thought I'd give you a little bit of history as we walk down to catch up with Jean-Marc. And if you remember last time, we'd got up to, it was the heyday of wine planting, vineyard planting in Tucson. We were between 1840 and the 1900. So between 1840 and 1900, big time for planting. The vineyards increased from 270 hectares right up to 1,500. So they planted everywhere. They started in the plain because it was easier, and then they went up on the hillside slopes and planted vineyards up there. That's because the price of wine just went through the roof. They were getting 35 francs per hectolitre, which was 3 times what it was before. So they're getting lots of money for wine. So it became a commercial crop. For the first time, the people in Tucson had a commercial crop, but it wasn't going to last. It started with phylloxera. I remember I mentioned phylloxera. Phylloxera hit Tucson in 1881, and it meant that they had to rip up all of the vineyards and replant all the vineyards with American rootstocks. So phylloxera was the beginning of their problems. They had to replant with American rootstock, which meant they had to just took more work. Whereas before, it was quite easy to plant a vineyard. After phylloxera, they had to use American rootstock, so it's grafted. Everything had to be grafted, and they had to dig bigger holes. They had to spray for odium and mildew as well. So things became a bit more complicated. The costs increased, so they had to increase their yields to pay for the work. And in increasing the yields, they planted things like Aramon, great variety, and also Carignan. So Carignan became the big cropper here. So then, unfortunately, the people started drinking less wine. There was competition from beer and cider. Also, there were imports. There were big imports from Algeria. 85% of imports into France came from Algeria, and they needed this during phylloxera, but once they got their vineyards up and going again, they still had those imports from Algeria, so causing big problems and lowering the price as well. And also, something I found out, there was also a big production of illegal wine called vin de sucre, or sugar wine. And vin de sucre was made by, do you remember the Lees? the lees and the marc, just the byproducts from wine. And people used to add water and sugar and re-ferment, and they'd sell that as wine. And they'd actually make that in the big urban centres. So all of these things meant that there was overproduction, just too much wine, and drinking wine was actually falling. So at the beginning of the 1900s, the situation got really, really bad. Just to give you an idea, the price of wine, which was at 35 francs a hectolitre, dropped in 1890. It dropped to 20 francs a hectolitre. But by 1906, a hectolitre of wine was only worth 1 franc. Just 1 franc. So imagine the crisis there was, the overproduction. There were stocks, they had to keep the wine. In keeping the wine, they didn't really have good storage facilities, so the wine, they needed to sell it quickly, so they lowered the price as well. So all of that led to great unrest in the world of wine. In Touchant as well, just to show you how hard up the growers were, they wanted to build the gendarmerie, the big police station, in the village of Touchant at the end of the 1800s, and they couldn't find any piece of land, constructible land, that hadn't been remortgaged. So hard times, really hard times for the growers here. And that meant it was the end of the heyday of wine planting. People started abandoning the hillside vineyards, which is where the quality came from, and concentrated on the vines down in the middle, in the plains. So critical situation, and we will see in our next little chapter on history on Thursday what that led to. So how did they cope, the growers in Touchant, at the beginning of the 1900s with overproduction and then the floor just fallen out of the wine market. But today, that's the history lesson over. Look, it's a lovely day here in the Carignan. It's very chilly. So we did have an overnight frost. So in actual fact, the leaves are all falling off the vines now. But I'm going to catch up with Jean-Marc because while we've been pruning, this is, I've got my shadow here, we have, in the rows of vines, we have the cuttings. So this is what's left once we've pruned the vines. And nowadays, Jean-Marc gets his tractor out and he will actually go along with a mulcher, and that's what he's doing this morning. He's going along with the mulcher on the back of the tractor to plough, well, to mulch those up so that they can be ploughed as compost back into the soil. You obviously have to have really healthy sarments to be able to do this. It is a bit of a cliffhanger, isn't it, the wine lane? I know, it's so exciting, this history of the area and wine production. So just waiting for Jean-Marc to come down here, and we'll just have a quick chat about what they used to do with these. Anybody got an idea what people used to do with these branches in the village? So go back about 100 years. What would people do with the branches here? Oh, more, hi Gilly, and hi Paul as well. So just waiting for Jean-Marc to come along. And just while I'm waiting for Jean-Marc, just to let you know, on Thursday, really exciting, I'm going to have Helen McGinn on my vineyard ramble. She's going to be virtually in a vineyard with me. Helen McGinn, known as Knackered Mother, and also the TV wine expert. She's on BBC Saturday Kitchen. Jean-Marc's telling me to get out the way, and I'm telling him if he could actually stop the tractor, but I'll get out the way because I think his tractor. So sometimes you get, because it's so stony, you get stones flying from the mulcher. So I just got out the way, that was a good idea. And now it's just going 5 minutes and going catch up. Yes, Helen, isn't it fantastic? So Helen, I just finished that. Helen McGinn is going to be on at the end of my ramble on Thursday, and she's going to have one of my mystery wines with her, which she will be tasting and giving you clues. So Ramblers, it's the first one on Thursday to guess the wine that Helen McGinn will be tasting at the end of my ramble. We'll get a t-shirt. So more details on that later. Morning, Jean-Marc.
Morning.
How are you today?
Well, thank you.
It's a bit nippy, chilly.
Yeah, it is.
A little bit. My fingers are frozen. So I was just talking to the Ramblers about the sarments, so the sarments, and explain, I can speak properly, and we were talking about the history of the sarments and what people, donc qu'est-ce qu'ils faisaient les gens avant avec les sarments, so what did people used to do with the branches, the shoots?
Autrefois, comme il y avait, tout était taillé à la main et pré-taillé à la main, et que tout le monde avait des cheminées dans les maisons.
So before, everything was pruned and top pruned by hand, so people were out in the vineyards.
Les personnes sarmentaient, donc les sarments.
So they called it,
étaient au sol.
sarmenter. Les gens, ils sarmentaient. So people sarmentaient.
Quand tu taillais, les sarments tombaient au sol.
So when you were pruning, the sarments, or the branches, fell on the floor.
Et ensuite, c'était principalement les femmes
And then mainly the women
qui allaient ramasser les sarments.
would come and collect up the sarments.
Alors, la plupart étaient brûlés directement dans les vignes.
So a lot of those sarments were then burnt directly in the vineyard.
Et d'autres étaient ramassés, mis en fagot pour être brûlés dans les
There's a
cheminées.
new word in here. So, and the other ones were picked up by the women and they were made into fagots. So these were bundles of sarments, fagot, so pronounced fag, like a cigarette, and o, fagot. And these were bundles of sarments.
Ça faisait à peu près de ce diamètre.
So they were big bundles. Oh, that tall. So they were quite wide. Et la hauteur, c'était combien?
Environ 1 mètre.
So about 1 meter tall. Et ils tenaient debout, non?
On choisissait les sarments des vignes où les sarments étaient suffisamment longs pour faire des fagots.
So they had their preferences, their favourite vines for making these fagots, or bundles of sarments, which actually stood on one end. So to make them, Jean-Marc was telling me earlier as well, so that they could stand up straight, they used to inverse the sarments, because the sarments are thicker at the end, which is nearer the plant, the trunk. So they would put one sarment one way, and then, c'est ça que tu m'as dit ce matin, ils inversaient.
Les sarments pour que les fagots soient réguliers.
Crisscrossed over the sarments, so they get a regular fagot.
Et en fait, je me rappelle mes grands-parents, dans leur cave, ils avaient des piles de fagots qui arrivaient jusqu'au plafond.
Oh, and Jean-Marc remembers in his grandparents' home, he remembers that his grandparents had piles of these bundles of branches right up to the ceiling.
Parce qu'ils cuisinaient, enfin ils se chauffaient avec du bois, là, ils avaient tous des cheminées.
So
ils faisaient des réserves pour toute l'année.
So they heated the house with wood, so they had a wood fire, but they used the sarments on the fire for cooking.
Principalement pour allumer.
So they used them, they were like fire lighters. So in actual fact, the sarments were like fire lighters. So they'd start the fire off.
Ouais, ou alors pour faire des grillades, mettons pour faire un steak, on le faisait juste avec des sarments.
Or to cook a steak as well. For a steak, you need a hot flame for not very long. So the sarments were perfect for that. And so they used to use the sarments for cooking steak, or they used to use it to light the fire. Mais il y avait aussi ce matin, tu me parlais de buffanello, un truc comme ça, non?
C'est une autre façon de ramasser les sarments.
So this was another way. It was quite a complex system of actually picking up these sarments and getting them into bundles, because there was another bundle which was called a
Buffanel, c'était plus
buffanel.
C'était plus petit, et le lien en fait c'était un sarment qui entourait les autres. Et ensuite tu mettais ça pour, c'était un peu un allume-feu ou...
So a buffanel,
Buffanel, ouais, c'était plus petit que les
was like the fagot, but it was smaller, and it was actually bound with another sarment. So the other ones were bound with wire. This was actually bound with another sarment. They were smaller, and they were used to light the fire again. So they would start off the fire, but
C'était plus pratique à utiliser, mais c'était plus long à faire.
Yeah, so it was much longer to actually make the bouffannelles, but it was much easier once you came to light the fire. They were cut to a smaller size, so they just fit in the fire really easily. So bouffannelles, fagots, and mostly the women made them. And I read
Les hommes taillaient principalement et les
so
femmes
the men
ramassaient
did
les
the
sarments.
pruning and the women picked up the branches behind. And I also heard, Jean-Marc, I don't know if this is true, that some people, depending how many branches and fagots and bouffannelles they made, they used to sell the rest to the baker, to the boulanger.
Une partie, oui, parce que les fours des boulangers étaient chauffés au bois. Et donc
Okay, so the baker's ovens were wood-fired again.
donc ils achetaient les sarments.
And they used to buy, the baker, the boulanger, used to buy the fagot from the farmers so
En fait,
that
ça
he could
chauffait vite, ça faisait une
use
flamme
it for his
qui
bread.
chauffait vite le four.
And it really, it
C'était
got the
plus
fire
pratique que de
going
faire
quickly,
du
the
feu,
heat going quickly. Wow, fascinating. Interesting.
Donc, je me rappelle quand j'étais enfant, j'allais avec ma mère et ma grand-mère pour ramasser les sarments, ça me plaisait pas.
Oh, so Jean-Marc remembers when he was little, he used to have to go with his mummy and his granny, and so he went with the women to pick up the sarments and tu faisais les fagots.
On faisait des fagots, mais souvent on faisait des tailles, on les brûlait.
And
dans
he
les
mainly burnt them. He was more into making big bonfires. Mum and Dad, do you remember that? We did some massive bonfires when we first started in Maury as well. And you get a real heat out of them, really strong. So Jean-Marc, not very keen on making his fagot and his bouffannelle. Mais aujourd'hui, on fait pas ça, en fait.
Très peu.
So some people still do that a little bit today. I love the idea of having them for our grillade in the summer, but in reality, la plupart des gens, en fait, en réalité,
On
ils
le
font...
boit sur place. Ouais.
So what we do now, peut-être on peut voir avant et après, we actually mulch them here in the vineyard. So if we just take a quick look, because time is marching on. So this is the sarment before the tractor goes over, and then let's have a look at Jean-Marc's mulching machine. Here is the mulcher, which you can't ferrande. Okay, so dedans il y a quelque chose, non?
Des marteaux
So inside there's like hammers,
qui broient
which mulch the branches, and then once they come out the other side, you can see they're much smaller and chopped up. Là, il y a le sol. Let me go up here and then I can look back this way to show you. So here, these are the mulched up sarments. Et ça, après, donc, quand tu laboures, ça va aller dans la terre.
Ouais.
And so when Jean-Marc comes out to plough, or Michel with Mignon, the tractor, then these will be ploughed back into the soil. Like this. Et voilà. So there we go. That was our lovely little lesson on sarment. So sarment, fagot and bouffannelle. Excellent. Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Jean-Marc. Ooh, we can't see you because of the sun. That's better. Merci beaucoup. Je te laisse continuer peut-être et on se voit jeudi. But on se verra avant. So I'll see Jean-Marc on Thursday. He'll be with us showing his holes that he's dug 1 metre deep in the vineyard so we can look at the structure of the soil. So that's going to be on Thursday, just before Helen McGinn comes on. Knackered Mother will be with me at the end on Thursday, but before that, looking at Jean-Marc's holes, so to speak. Merci beaucoup, Jean-Marc.
Avec plaisir.
Et à tout à l'heure. Je vais prendre le café, je pense. So, as we say goodbye to Jean-Marc, I'd just like to say thank you very much to everybody. As I mentioned, on Thursday we have a special, very special guest on. Helen McGinn, Knackered Mother, will be with us at the end of the session, and she will have one of my wines, so a mystery wine with her. And she's going to give us a couple of clues, and it will be the first one to guess the wine gets a Domaine Jones t-shirt. So look out for that on Thursday. Tell your friends, bring your friends along too. Au revoir tout le monde, bye!